generally Congress uses that week as a district work week, so I've been running around North Dakota this week.
So we get a day off and Congress gets a week off? Is that how it works?
Sometimes they call it a week off, yeah. Although
I don't think
the mileage on my vehicle.
I think you're back in your districts. Doesn't mean you're not working.
No, but to be honest, it's actually a rich part of the job. Because one of the things I try to do, and which is why I appreciate this opportunity so much, and I had a coffee with Cramer and Stanley, I guess it was the day before yesterday, and a round table up in Tioga. And, the rich part of doing your job well in Washington is to not spend too much time there. Spend time with real people, hearing about real things and real solutions and real challenges, and it's quite amazing what a person can learn.
Tell us about these new EPA regulations. There was a big powwow in Bismarck about this, and basically talking about EPA's new regulation on plants. What's going on? I mean, what do we need to be worried about? The
regulations, the specific regulations that the Public Service Commission was addressing yesterday in their symposium are what are called in Washington new source performance standards, and what they are, they're greenhouse gas emission standards being set by the EPA. You will recall a number of years ago that the Supreme Court ruled that greenhouse gas is in fact a pollutant, or it was really an endangerment finding. And what it said was that through the Clean Air Act, the EPA ought to consider greenhouse gas emissions. Now, it was a 5-4 ruling, and we could argue whether they were right or they're wrong. I think it was wrong. Greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant in my view, but it has ramifications, and of course, it's all part of the climate change hysteria. Well, the emission standards, or the greenhouse gas standards that the EPA came out with late last year, and it's been a long process coming out with the rule, but it set an emission standard for coal-fired power plants, in this case new coal-fired power plants. By June, they're going to come out with the standards for existing coal-fired power plants. We expect they'll be very similar. They're literally impossible to meet, literally impossible to meet with commercially, economically available technology to capture the carbon. In fact, what the EPA did is they specified carbon capture and storage technology as the means to reach these new standards that are impossible to meet. And as we know, there is technology, but there's none that's commercially available or economically viable. And so there's obviously a lot of pushback on these rules. And one of the worst things about it, Rob, is that EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy, in advance of putting out the final rules, had 11 listening sessions on the proposed rules in 11 cities across America, cities like San Francisco and Boston and Seattle and all of the big coal-producing cities of America, right? Literally not in a single top 10 coal-producing state did she have one of these listening sessions. So, it is clearly probably the greatest weapon that they've used so far, the most effective weapon so far.
Makes you wonder who they're listening to.
Coal, and fulfilling their promise to the president's promise to bankrupt coal companies and to skyrocket electricity rates.
Talking about the EPA, this news broke this week, and I'm going to quote from a Fox News article. He says, the article reads, newly disclosed emails suggest senior policy officials at the Environmental Protection Agency and environmental groups are working closely to kill the Keystone XL pipeline. These damning emails make it clear that the Obama administration has been actively trying to stop this important project for years. Senator John Barrasso, a Republican from Wyoming, who has long advocated for the Canada to Texas pipeline's construction, said in a statement to Fox News, the emails were obtained under a Freedom of Information Act request by the Energy and Environment Legal Institute. In one communication, Lena Moffat of the Sierra Club wrote to 3 senior policy advisors at the EPA, including Michael Gu, who was then an associate administrator for policy. What do you make of this? I mean, because obviously Keystone Pipeline, big issue for North Dakota. Is this, what's your reaction to this?
Well, first of all, the Keystone Pipeline is a big issue, not just for North Dakota, but for American and North American energy security, which is synonymous with national security. I'd much rather get 800 barrels per day of Canadian crude into the United States than Venezuelan or Middle Eastern crude. That said, none of this surprises me because whether you talk about oil development, coal development, probably the most egregious area where we've seen real close organization and consultation with the far left in the environmental movement with this administration has been through the Endangered Species Act, where in the last 4 years, far left liberal organizations like Sierra Club have sued the very liberal Interior Department or some other agency in the federal government in the administration. They've sued them in the last 4 years on over 500 cases of Endangered Species Act lawsuits. So the liberal organizations sue their liberal friends in the administration. They pick a court, usually in the West, of course, because then it's in the Ninth Circuit, which, as we know, is the most liberal appeals circuit in the federal system, and they come out with settlement agreements, in the judges' chambers, and those become the law of the land. And not only, by the way, do the left get their, win the lawsuit, so to speak, because they're suing their friends and coming up with settlement agreements, but then, as a result of their victory, the taxpayers pay the legal fees for both sides. They pay both the federal government's fees, obviously, and then they pay the plaintiff's fees because, after all, they won the lawsuit. And so we just see a lot of this type of activity. And so I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised that they're so careless that they and brazen that they put it in emails. But then again, this is a pretty brazen administration.
What I mean, do you think at this point that the Keystone Pipeline is going to be approved while President Obama is in office?
I used to be very optimistic about it, Rob, and I guess I would put it at less than 50-50 because it's just that at every turn they seem to try to find a reason to delay it longer and longer and longer. And at this point, there's no more possible studying you could do. It's by far the most analyzed and studied and environmentally studied pipeline in the history of the world, and I don't know what more you could possibly learn to approve it. Now, could it be approved? I think, to be honest with you, I mean, this is a clear example of the consequences of elections. If the United States Senate switches control to the Republican Party, it'll be largely over issues like this. And it'll be largely due to not the fact that there aren't enough Democrats in the United States Senate to pass a bill that would deem the Keystone Pipeline ready for construction, which the House has already done, and I was a co-sponsor of the bill. But the fact that there haven't been enough Democrat senators to get the bill to the floor for a vote to demonstrate, and in fact, it could almost be, it's close, I think, in the Senate to even being a veto-proof bill. So, it's really, if in fact the Senate was to switch parties after this next election over things like the Keystone and other, I think, largely energy issues, as well as Obamacare issues, then I think the president would have to take pause and say, do I want to spend my last 2 years, fighting and doing nothing, or do I want to have some legacy that actually helps move our economy forward and create some jobs and wealth?
701-293-9000, 888-970-9329 if you'd like to ask the congressman a question. We're now 3 weeks into January. We heard some pretty bold talk from Democrats about challengers lining up to take you on. But even, they told us that they were going to be announced. The announcement was imminent. Now I guess it's been postponed till February. What do you make of this? Are you feeling pretty confident heading into 2014?
Well, Rob, to be honest,
I do have a call. Stephanie on the line.
I was surprised some people to this point, being, given my background as a former party chairman, although that was over 20 years ago, that I haven't spent a lot of time in my first year in Congress thinking about politics or campaigning or even doing a lot of it. I just try to do my job as best I can, and I think there are a number of things at play, and I think I always appreciate honest talk. I think there are a number of things at play, not the least of which is the fact that this is not going to be a very good year for Democrats across the country. Now, North Dakota is pretty well known for bucking the trend oftentimes, but they have a president who's in the middle of his second term, and that's never good. But the middle of this president's, this particular president's second term is, pretty dismal for the party that's in the White House. And I think as you see his support deteriorating among his own base, as well as certainly the independents, especially. It's just looking like a very daunting task. So, I don't know that it's a reflection of Democrats in North Dakota as much as it is a reflection of of the national trend.
We've got a call on the line. Stephanie, you're on with Congressman Kevin Cramer. What's on your mind?
Yes, I was curious to know whether or not Mr. Cramer has been in Alberta to see the mining of the tar sands.
Hi, Stephanie. No, I've never been there. I've been invited a number of times, of course, but I've never gone up to see them personally.
Okay. And then have you seen the spills that have occurred or talked to people who have been around the spills of the tar sands in Michigan and in Arkansas?
I've never been to see any of the spills, although I'm familiar with some of the. If I understand what you're talking about, some of the there have been some issues with regard to some pipeline spills here and there. We actually had an incident in North Dakota at Ludden on the original Keystone pipeline that I was part of siting, where there was a failure at a pumping station there, and several barrels were spilled at Ludden. And I did go to that site. In fact, the day after the spill occurred, I was there with inspectors from the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration as well as the company.
Are you aware of the third largest dam in the world that holds back contaminated water in Canada, and that it takes over 70 barrels of water to mine a barrel of tar sand?
Actually, that is from everything I know about the science of it, that is not true any longer. It used to be that the development of oil sands has changed dramatically, frankly in the last decade or so. It's become more of an in situ process rather than the open pit mining process that was once associated with the recovery of oil sands. So the in situ process is a process where the underground oil is the voids are injected with heat and of course it's natural gas that's used as well a great deal. So it's really, in many respects nowadays, it comes out of the ground much more like traditional crude than the sludge that we've seen in some of the videos of previous years, things like that.
They're still using open pit mining up there, and they're increasing the open pit mining. So to say that their technology is better now, sure it is. But then you also have to look at the technology that they're using and the acids that they're using. And this dam they didn't create it out of non-need. I
think it's fantastic what they've been able to do. There's no question about it. And it's an important part of our energy security for our North American continent.
However,
I far prefer it to importing from our enemies in the Middle East.
I hate to interject, but we got to go to a break, Stephanie.
So
thanks.
You got to cut me off.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. It's radio, Stephanie. We've only got so much time. I tell you what, Stephanie. If you want to hold through the break, we'll come back. If you want to stay on hold, you can come back and you can finish your comments to Representative Cramer. If other people want to call in as well, 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. We'll be back right after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Rob Porch sitting in for Mike Capel. We've got Representative Kevin Cramer on the line, and I promised Stephanie she could ask her question after the break. Stephanie, one last question for Congressman Cramer, then I want to move on. Go ahead.
Well, it's not a question. It's a comment to the type of technology he's referring to, because the technology, sure, is there, but it isn't any safer. It is put under pressure with heat and much more volatile acids to actually crack, not frack, but crack into the earth to mine this tar sand, and hence the third largest dam in the world full of contaminants.
Stephanie,
I guess everybody's just more interested in taking that handle from the pump and pumping their car full of fuel and thinking about it tomorrow, but it's going to catch up with us.
Stephanie, thanks for the call. Congressman, your response?
Sure. The steam that she's referring to is really been revolutionary in the last 10 years. In fact, now over 80%, frankly, of the oil sands that are mined out of Alberta are now done through this in situ process that I referred to, where they inject steam into the ground. And I don't know that it breaks it up so much as it heats the oil. It makes the oil more oilish and less more like a sludge. It makes it more liquid, which is far more efficient, far less carbon footprint, and far safer. And at the same time, they're finding ways to use less water to separate the bitumen from the sludge, and so the technology is there. But I would just say this: in addition, while everybody's working to make it safer, less carbon footprint, more energy efficient, remember what the cost of importing oil from the Middle East is. It's the cost of lives and soldiers and airmen and sailors and Marines and as well as other things. It's just energy security for the North American continent is right at our fingertips, and we need to do everything we can in a responsible manner to meet that goal.
Couple minutes left. Last time around in the 2012 cycle, you skipped the Republican Party convention, went straight to the primary. This time around, you're the incumbent. Are you going to go to the convention and seek the nomination there?
I fully expect to go to the convention and seek the nomination, seek their endorsement in Minot. Should I choose to seek another term, and I guess I'm certainly leaning heavily that way.
Again, we're well into 2014. Why do you think it is? And I want to know how you feel about this, because you have been, more so than the other members of our delegation, town halls, open forum radio hosts. I mean, you've really gone out to communicate. Do you feel like that's paying dividends, and maybe why you don't have a Democrat challenger more than 3 weeks into January?
Well, here's one thing I'd say, Rob, is that I've always believed, even when I was the loyal opposition and Democrats controlled everything in North Dakota, that
got about a minute, Rob. 1 minute.
And part of good policy, I think, especially as a member of the House of Representatives, which the founders called the People's House, is access, and access equals accountability. And I think I've accomplished some things in this first year.
Correction, 1 minute 30.
Congress didn't accomplish anything. And I think all of that lends itself to, to good politics. But I've really tried to keep my eye on that ball of being accessible and accountable. And the other thing, Rob, is I like it. I enjoyed the things. I enjoy Stephanie. I appreciate her input, and I appreciate her take on things. When I go to the town halls, it's not like everybody's there to congratulate me on a job well done. So it's actually part of the job that I find to be the greatest blessing.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've been to some of your town halls, and I can tell you, not everybody's there to tell you what a great job you're doing.
No.
But that comes with the territory. Kevin, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Rob, anytime. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's Representative Kevin Cramer, of course, going to be running it, and going to be going to the NDGOP convention to seek the nomination, which I think is kind of interesting. But anyway, I got to commend Kevin Cramer for agree with him or disagree with him. The guy engages, and I think he engages like nobody else in the state. Well, I'm Rob Port, sitting in for Mike Capel. We got a break coming up. We'll come back. I want to talk to you a little bit about this Google Glass thing. I got an invitation to buy this Google Glass thing, and I want to know your thoughts on this wearable technology. What do you think? Are you worried about it? 701-293-9000, 888-970-9329, or you can catch me on Twitter, too, @RobPort. We'll be right back. Don't go away.